how that relates to Crystal Reports. We'll talk a little bit about Crystal Reports in .NET, talk about Crystal Reports in Eclipse, and we might even make it 4 things about Crystal Reports that you may not know. Go into a little bit of Crystal Reports and some dynamic prompts. So our agenda is going to be, I'll talk a little bit about who New Horizons is, and then we'll go into Crystal Reports integration information. So New Horizons, which of course is where I work, is a proven worldwide training provider. We have flexible learning solutions covering a broad spectrum of topics taught by industry-leading instructors. We have the largest international network with 2,100 classrooms approximately, about 2,400 instructors in 56 countries, and about 3 million students per day of training. There are different ways that you can take classes here at New Horizons. An instructor-led training where you're actually sitting in the room with the instructor. We have online live virtual delivery, which a lot of our classes are now. Or we could come to your place and do some private group training customized for your particular organization. And we are a strong vendor partnerships. The one that's important to me is the Adobe. We're an Adobe authorized training center, as I'm an Adobe certified instructor. So just a little bit about me. I've been with New Horizons for 14 years. I learned Crystal Reports before I came to New Horizons by working with the free, reduced, and full-pay lunch program. And many of the school districts all over the nation that I would visit would be using Crystal Reports as their official report writing tool to give the numbers for their free, reduced, and full-pay lunch. And many states, Crystal Reports is their official report writing program. And as I mentioned, I'm an Adobe certified instructor. So we'll start off, first of all, by talking about what is mashup. And many people, when they think of mashup, especially here in the state of Michigan, having one of our native Michiganders, Kid Rock, and the song All Summer Long, where he took Sweet Home Alabama and Werewolves of London and mashed them together. That's the idea behind a mashup. And that's where this term originally came from, is disc jockeys would take songs and they would combine them together into a mashup. Well, a mashup, as we're talking about it, is going to be a web page or an application that integrates complementary elements from 2 or more sources. So we could be using Crystal Reports and Flex and a web hosting service if we're going to link specifically to bring things together in a mashup. So part of the page is Crystal Reports. Part of it might be coming from a web page mashed into that particular Crystal Reports to make it dynamic so that we could have the user use drop-downs or checkboxes, changing the view of what's actually there. We might start off with a map inside of the Flash element and have a density, a bunch of dots telling exactly what's there. And then we could use a drop-down and say, well, I really don't want to see the density map. I want to see it as a column graph or a pie chart or something like that. So the users are the ones who are actually determining how they're looking at the data that's there. So generally speaking, Crystal Reports has the ability to act as a container for Flash and Flex objects coming in. The container has the ability to host and load SWF files using the Flash player, which of course is on 98% of the computers in the world. Crystal Reports also can store that Flash right within its report definition. So as I give the report out in whatever way that I'm exporting it out, that Flash file is embedded within. This would enable the report author to either embed or link to the Flash by using some sort of a web service. So what is the power of using Adobe Flash with Crystal Reports? Well, you're creating a SWIFT file integrated into the report, either built-in or linked via the website. And the report data can be shared with the SWIFT via Flash vars for compelling, interactive, and information-rich reports. So I could use Adobe Flash, build my SWF, make a data connection to whatever the data source is. And then with that independent SWF, either embed it within the report or put it on a web service and have a link to that particular object. So we can make our reports say a lot more with some dynamic flash graphics, embed some video in perhaps, or link to some video. So information that's there could then people could actually listen to a video which explains what you're seeing, explains the numbers, and it could be an independent crystal report. What's the power of Flash with SAP Crystal Data Dashboard Design integration? You can use dashboard design, which was former Excel CIS, to make Swift files that can be imported into a report for what-if models that enable the user to make decisions dynamically without actually leaving the report file. So we can embed a Flash file generated with the dashboard designer into the report for improved visualization and what-if scenarios. So let's take a look at that. So here I've got Dashboard Designer, and I'm using the free trial version at this point. Flashpoint Designer here, your Dashboard Designer here, runs for just an independent person about $500, or you can get to the heavy use up to about $2,000, depending on what you're using. So this is what I want to do. I want to put inside of my crystal report, a very simple crystal report here that has some customer orders. I want to take these 28 records, and up in the header of this report, I just want like a stock ticker to go across, which is dynamic. As we would add in more records here, we could have dynamically go across the ticker. I want to take the order number and the order amount and put it across the top dynamically as a stock ticker. So again, let me get back into Dashboard Designer here a minute. Dashboard Designer has a lot of components over on the side here in this panel. We could go into some charts. We could actually have some independent containers. We could have some selectors, maps, text, other things like calendars, arts and background, a little bit of web connectivity, Swift loaders, slideshows, etc. Well, I'm going into the selectors here, and within this list of selectors, I'll go with my ticker here, click and drag it onto my development stage, and just roughly here make it larger so that we can use it. Okay, down at the bottom we've got an Excel interface here where I can set up what this ticker is going to use to get its data. But instead of using Excel, I'm just using this to develop that Swift file. And then when I get into Crystal Reports, I'll say, okay, now that I have these two basic components, one for a label, one for some data, I can put my Crystal Report information in instead of this Excel. Excel is just helping us to set this up. And Excel is embedded within the Dashboard Designer here. So I'm just going to give some information for myself. I'll say that here in this first cell A1, we'll give this as being the labels, which is going to be a row, labels. And here in column B, I'll just have my values label, which will also be for my data. Now, in starting out, I'm going to have about 27 records in my Crystal Report. So I'm just going to bring these here, and for development's sake, as we do this webinar here, I'm just going to give that area a color just so that we can pay attention to it. You certainly wouldn't have to do that as you develop this, this application. And this first column here, the data type that is inside of Crystal Reports are the order numbers, which is a number data type. So I'll right-click here, format these cells to be a number with no decimal places. And the second column here, my data type is going to be the order amount, which is a currency. And so I'll just format that for the component as being currency, and I'll leave it with 2 decimal places. So setting up my ticker, I'll give it a title, and the title I'll give this is order amounts. That's just for me within the component to identify it. And then within the component, I want to bind the labels as being the first column. And the values as being the second column. Going here to the Behavior tab, if I ever get to the place within this ticker that I have less than the 27 rows, then I want to ignore any blank cells. I don't want the ticker going across with some blank values as it cycles through the information that's there. Notice I can do different things like determine how fast the scroll speed would be, etc. Going from left to right. Well, I really don't want to dash between these items, and so I think what I'll do is I'll just use some asterisks here, and let's just do it as 3 asterisks between the data that will be there for us. Switching to my Appearance tab, I don't want to show any background on the ticker, so it picks up the background of the report. And in the text that actually will be showing there, I don't really want to show the title, but I do want to display the values. Now just checking my work. My labels are going from A2 to A28, and my values are in the second column from B2 to B28. The values are still there. Okay, my stage is fairly large. So if I put this into Crystal Reports, it's going to be this big, huge, large ticker. Well, I really don't want that to happen. And so I'm going to go and fit the canvas to my component. And now I need to do a little bit of a data binding. This ticker needs to be bound to Crystal Reports. So coming here to managing my connections, I want to add a connection in as a Crystal Reports data consumer. My row header will be this first column. And my data will be coming from the second column. So now we have connection to the data that's going to be built within this ticker that we're going to have as an independent SWIFT that shows up in our crystal report. So I'm ready to export this out as a SWIFT. I don't really have to understand Flash and how Flash works. I don't have to understand timeline. I don't have to understand action script. Everything is being done for me by using this dashboard designer. And I don't have to become a Flash expert. So to export out my SWIFT file, we'll come down to export. We'll say that we're going to put it out as a Flash SWIFT. I'll save it to my desktop because within Crystal Reports, obviously, it needs to know where it is. And I know you can't see me, but there's nothing up my sleeves here. Let's name it Otis. We could name it anything we want, and probably I would do something better than Otis, but just nothing up my sleeves here. And I'll save it. Okay, switching now over to Crystal Reports. We have a SWIFT out there that we have created. Now we want to put it inside of this report as a dynamic object. As data changes, we wanted to make it so that that ticker is going to pick up with those dynamic changes. So on our insert toolbar, remember that's the third toolbar down vertically, the first one horizontally. The last icon that's there on Crystal Reports 2008 above is insert in a Flash object. I'm going to embed this Flash object inside of the report. We could also link to it. I don't have it on a web server or anything. I just put it on my desktop. So my SWIFT location browsing on my desktop is Otis here. It's now attached to my mouse pointer. I think I'll put it inside of the page header. Wow, it didn't go. Now I'll just put it inside the report header. So the ticker's going, but it says I don't know what to bind to inside of this report. Which field do you want to put inside of the ticker? I notice we've got our separators there, being the 3 asterisks. So let me right-click on that Flash ticker, go down to the Flash Data Expert. We said we wanted to bind the order ID as being our label. And we wanted the order amount as being the actual data value. And when I click OK, I have inside of our Crystal Reports here, and I would do a little bit of formatting on it. I have inside of my Crystal Reports a Flash object that's dynamic. It's picking up its data from down below. It's taking these order numbers and it's putting the order amount after them. Fairly simple. I didn't have to really be a Flash expert to do that, though I am certified in Flash. I could have developed this within Flash, but the components within the dashboard designer are fantastic. They just have some really great components in there. I just wanted to do a simple example with you. So the next question is, how does Adobe Flex, and really that's kind of a misnomer, though Adobe developed Flex for us, it now has gone through many, many different iterations. Really you can get Flex best from Apache. Apache Flex is actually what is linked to within the new components within your Creative Cloud and in Creative Cloud 2014, which has just been released, you've got the Adobe Flash Builder that's within there, and that's where you'll find the link that gets you to the Apache Flex. Well, how could that make Crystal Reports a little bit more dynamic? Well, you can use the Adobe Flex Builder or the Adobe Flash Builder. You can create a user interface to access report data, integrate it with external web services. So you got the user interface developed within Flex. You're getting your data from some sort of a web service inside of there. Sorry, the GoToMeeting thing came up there. And within the report can be easier to find even when you don't have access to data. So we could use it with the web server, we could use it without. So the next thing I want to focus on, so the first thing that we looked at was using Flash Flex technology within Crystal Reports. Another direction that you could go would be using Crystal Reports in .NET. It works with Visual Studio 2010 and above, and you can download Crystal Reports for Visual Studio by going to www.sap.com/crystalreports/VS2010. Get a download of that particular program. One thing to note is that once you do the installation there, dynamic help files and the ability to updates, you actually have to go through the loading of it manually. So once you install the Visual Studio, you go through a second install to get your dynamic help files. You go through a third install to get the update services. Well, .NET allows the user to actually build an application that you're going to place into Crystal Reports. That application, that report, can either be embedded within the application or it could be non-embedded. An embedded report is going to be part of that application file, and the non-embedded report is linked to the application. So specifically about embedded reports, one of the things is that if you embed the report into your application, your .NET application, it really has to be of a smaller variety of report. Large reports don't allow the compile to go all the way through. The advantage of it, of course, is that all your files are in one place, that you're not having to worry about your link or your binding specifically to the report as an external data source. But one of the other things that is there, along with making it a smaller report, is the fact that changes to the report mean that you have to actually recompile the application itself. So every time that I go in and make some major changes to the report, the Crystal report, I have to go back into the .NET services that has that embedded report in, go through the recompile process, and redistribute the application. So a non-embedded report file can be much, much larger. You can have a fairly large and robust report. The files, of course, are going to be linked. And when you make major changes to the report itself, because it's making a link to that report and it's dynamically getting it every single time the application calls for it, it means that you don't have to go through the entire, recompile the entire application. So the process that you're going to make is you're going to create for yourself a new project. You're going to add for yourself a viewer control to that project, how you're going to view that report. You point the viewer to the report, and then you run the project. So your viewers, you could go in and use an RPTR viewer within the report viewer control. The advantage of this is that your files are secured. You can't take that RPTR file and change it back to an RPT file, which they then could, make major changes to your Crystal report. It secures it up. You go through an export routine to actually get it as an RPTR file. And within Crystal Reports 2008 and above, you have a WPF viewer. So it's used within a Windows Form application or a Crystal Reports WPF application. So one of the other solutions that you have, you got the Flash Flex solution, and within that, I'm including the dashboard designer. You have the .NET solution. You also have Crystal Reports for Eclipse. It's used to develop, to assist you with Java report development. It is available for you at scn.sap.com/community/crystal-reports-for-eclipse. With this, it's a straight installation. Before, I did the installation with the .NET of the help files, dynamic help files, and also the update services. This comes in really clean, installs very nice. This allows application development, and you could have little to no Java programming experience in order to create these. Well, some of the new features that come with Crystal Reports for Eclipse, you can create for yourself some custom report wizards. You can add some pages to the Crystal Reports designer. You can provide a custom data source to the report. You can open and save reports from a custom location. You also have drag and drop functionality that has been added in. Other enhancements, your development kit gives access to most report objects that are available through your Crystal Reports designer. It does have support for Excel data-only export format and has an improved PDF export format. And building reports is based on some, you could do it based on some custom SQL using the Eclipse SQL files. Image location. You can define the location of a dynamic image using a conditional formula. You can find a lot of information about those three solutions that I've talked about. The mashup, where you're doing it by using Flash, Flex, and the dashboard designer. The .NET solution, including installing the .NET, installing the dynamic help files, and installing the your update services, and then also Crystal Reports for Eclipse, how to install it, how to use it. Within the book Crystal Reports 2011 for developers, the report design and integration. I think this is the best book that I have found so far, specifically having to do with those type of dynamic design. And now for something completely different. Going to the whole idea of dynamic parameters. Let me get myself back to Crystal Reports here a moment. I'll close up this particular report, saving changes. We want to go to the whole idea of creating for ourselves some prompts, some dynamic prompts that we can use. And I'm going to use an example where we're going to use a cascading prompt. Pause for a second. On the book that I referred to just a moment ago, if you get the versions for Nook and the version for Kindle, if you have the choice of going between the two, the book is actually two different types of books. I mean, the major content of the book is the same, but the Kindle version, it has a lot of extra material, where the Nook version is just the straight book that you would get and pull off the shelf. So if you have the choice of getting either one and you're doing it by use of some sort of a tablet device, etc., I would get the Nook version, especially if you're going to be doing the solution of working with Flex or working with the dashboard designer or working with a Flash itself. The extra content within the Kindle version, much, much better. Okay, now getting into the dynamic parameters and getting into Crystal Reports here a minute. And let me just open up a report. Okay, so I want to create for myself a dynamic prompt, cascading prompt. And so as you've seen before, remember that when working with these parameters, many times it's a multiple stage event. You're creating the parameter or the question that's going to be asked or what the user is going to use dynamically to choose for what information is shown within the report. And then you're going to do something with that particular answer. Whether they're using a drop-down, whether they're typing something in, we have the second step of what are we going to do with that particular answer. And so we would use either a filter, we use a sort, we use something to use that dynamic answer. So I want to go over here on the Field Explorer and create for myself a parameter field. And I'll just call this customer location. The type of information that I would like to get would be a string. Because I want a cascading prompt, I'm going to choose the type of dynamic. Remember, you've got static and dynamic. Static, the list that you provide, the information that you give the user is static. If I wanted to allow the user through the prompt to choose, let's say, the 50 states, one of the states, I want to filter down to a specific state. Well, it's been a long time since we added a new state. I really don't need crystal reports as would happen with a dynamic prompt. That when I choose the drop-down, I give the user the drop-down, that it quickly looks at the database and says, hey, do we have a new state yet? Do we have a new state yet? Do we have a new state yet? Which, of course, could take a little bit of more bandwidth. It could take a little bit more time in order to do that. And so by making a static prompt, it's not resource intensive because it just says, here's the list. The list isn't changing that often. If we were to add a 51st state, we would have to go back into the prompt here, and we would have to add in the 51st state as being either the list that we're generating or the manual list that I type in. Well, with this a dynamic prompt where we're actually cascading the prompt, we have to do it as a dynamic. Well, in the Choose a Data Source section here, I'm going to click to add an item. And I'll start off by having them choose a country. And the prompt that I'll get them, you always want to be polite, please choose a country from the list provided. Once they choose the country, I want to give them the ability then to choose within that country a region. And again, I should give us some instructions. Please choose a region from the list provided. And then finally, the thing that I'm really looking for is I'm looking for them to identify a city. Within this international sales, I want to identify it specifically by the city. That's what the users of this report are looking for. We want to be able to whittle it down or filter it down to sales for a particular city. So the last prompt will be a city. Give them instructions. Please choose a city from the list provided. Okay, so I have my three prompts. One for the country, one for the region, finally for the city. The city is what I'm really looking for. Clicking OK to create the parameter. So that's going to give them, when they refresh the report, when they go to print the report, gives them the dialog box, and this is okay, choose a country, choose a region, choose a city. If I did nothing with that, if I just left it as it is now, they choose their city, and the report gives me everything. Gives me all 2,191 records. Doesn't filter down to anything. So the next thing, of course, is that you have to take the second step from the cascading prompt that you've given yourself, and you've got to do something with it. Let me go to the design view here. And I'll take my customer location, city, parameter. I'm going to throw it just within the report footer. This is a step that I don't have to take. And I'll just align it here with the left-hand margin. It will just indicate within the report footer the city that I chose. I could even hide that. A lot of times the reason why you bring your prompt into your report and hide it if it's necessary is if I need to use that prompt as being a data source for what happens within a sub-report. So we're going to expand our variable up within our sub-report, build up for ourselves a shared variable. Within that shared variable, I'm sharing the information from this particular prompt with the sub-report. Then it would be necessary for me to bring this in. If I'm not doing something like that, that's when this could be an optional step. So building for ourselves that selection. So we'll go to our select expert. This is going to be on the city field. And I want to make it equal to my prompt of customer location, city. Click OK. Preview our report. Here's my dynamic prompt. Please choose for yourself a country. Well, I'll choose the country of the United States. The region. Notice all that I have here, of course, is the region that I have to do from the United States. If I chose the Netherlands, I'm going to have a completely different set of regions. Well, here, the United States again. The region is going to be California. And we'll choose San Diego. So, woohoo! Here is my data for San Diego. Worked great. Fantastic. Got what we wanted to get out of this particular report. Well, here's an interesting thing. If I refresh this report and I prompt for a new parameter value, and I say I would like to choose the country of Jamaica, only one region, Kingston, only one city, Kingston. Well, that's cool. Click OK. And oops, we got a problem here. Because Rhode Island has a Kingston also. Because our dynamic prompt said we're just basing it upon the city, then it says, okay, well, I'll give you the Kingstons. And it's not until the last page, page 3 here, that we actually get the one record that has anything to do with Jamaica. That being Kingston, Jamaica. So our dynamic prompt here is actually, we find within here, and there are actually 2 examples that we could have chosen, where you've got the same city in multiple locations, multiple countries, multiple regions. So this means that we've got to go in and we've got to actually make that prompt more than just we're looking for the city. That's our end result. One of the things that you can do now with dynamic prompts, this is what you might not know, is the fact that we can make that dynamic prompt actually pull more and retain more information than just simply what's the city or what is this particular end result of cascading prompts, because for the longest time, that's all that you really have had the ability to do is to get the end result there. So going back into my parameter field and editing it, it's very, very simple. I could go and I could say, I want to create an additional parameter here having to do with the country. And in this particular report, that would solve our problem real easily. But I can see the possibility that you could have a larger report than this simple example here. And you would also need to create for yourself a region parameter. It really doesn't hurt to do it. You're not really taking up more resources of the computer or whatever by actually choosing that additional one. Well, clicking OK with the editing of my parameter, I now have over here 3 parameters. Only one is being used at the moment. That's the one having to do with the city that you see the little question mark next to. Well, I need to add an additional selection formula here. So going to my select expert. This one needs to be based on the country. And I need to make this equal to, notice all 3 of my parameters now at the top of the list. Parameters always are listed there. Make it equal to whatever was chosen for the country. And when I click OK, my Jamaica, my Kingston, click OK, solves the problem that we had, specifically having to do with the multiple values for Kingston. And of course, if I were being consistent here, I probably would add in my country parameter in my report footer if that was important for me to show it. So when I preview it, this is what you chose. You chose Kingston, Jamaica, and we probably could label that, etc. I know that you know how to label in Crystal Reports, so I'll set that up. So 3 things that you may not have known about Crystal Reports. The integration of a Flash solution, Flash Flex solution, where we're building using the Flash player as being our container element. We can incorporate that using the Insert Flash button on the Insert toolbar, and we could bring in a dynamic component that way. Another way we could do it is build an application in .NET, and within that application of .NET using a viewer, bring Crystal Reports into our .NET application. The third way we could do it is by building an application and using Eclipse, and that being able to use a Java solution, a web solution, and a web services solution to bring in our dynamic content, specifically having to do with Crystal Reports. And then adding in the additional one of dynamic parameters and the fact now that you can have multiple parameters from a single setup. So the next steps, if you were to go to the next steps from here, taking either Crystal Reports level 1 here at New Horizons or the level 2, and if you want to go with the Flash solution, you could go to our Adobe Flash Part 1 to get you familiar with Flash. But getting into the action script and specifically building components and things like that within there, you would use your Adobe Flash Part 2 class and getting to that specific set. Well, with that, I don't know if we have any questions that are posted up, Brian, but got a few minutes here for a question and answer they asked me to do.
There are no questions at this time. Does anyone have any questions for Michael? A question just came in about sharing the slide deck via email. We typically don't send out the slide decks themselves. However, the recording of these webinars will be available on our YouTube channels. So regardless of which New Horizons you manage to locate the webinar, you can check out their respective YouTube channel, and the recording of this webinar should be there within a few days. Anything else for Michael? Question for you, Michael. Is the designer part of Crystal or a separate component?
It's a separate component. The dashboard that I demonstrated?
I believe
yes,
that's
each one of those is a separate one. The .NET, the Eclipse, and then also the dashboard designer. Dashboard designer is the one that really is the costly one, and that's the one that I was using the trial version, showing you the trial version, which is fully implemented. And that's just helping you to create that Swift file. You certainly could do everything the dashboard designer does by doing it through Flash. You have to learn Flash as a program.
Okay. For dynamic parameters, the report should be executed first, correct?
Yes. Yes, you would open up that particular report, and then you would go and set up your parameter inside of that report. Again, that's done over on the Field Explorer, right over in here, and saying I want to create for myself a parameter field, and that's where the dynamic prompt comes from. Of course, you also could do dynamic prompts, drop-down list components like that inside of Flash or your dashboard designer. Or the components could also be within your .NET solution and your Eclipse solution, where you're actually building it yourself, your drop-down list yourself. Here it's doing it for you. So you could do it outside before the report is done and just have it as being in the viewer and do it that way. So yes, it could be done either way.
Okay. And a question from, looks like Deborah, how do you get to the YouTube channel?
And you'll have to answer that one, Brian.
Yeah, Deborah, could you elaborate a little bit more on that one? And another question for you, Mike. Why would I use a cascade parameter from Sam?
Why would you use a cascade parameter?
Yeah.
Like inside of this international report, sales report, we could have hundreds of thousands of records. And I want to make sure that I get down to, make it easy for the user to get to the specific city that they're looking for in order to be able to answer questions by way of telephone, whatever you're going to be using this report for. And to go in and to set up for themselves using this little funnel, Select Expert, to actually create a selection to get to that city might be difficult for the end user. And so by making it so that they can just use drop-downs and whittle down to the information that they need to get by using this cascading parameter, like here in Grand Rapids, I don't know our Grand Rapids zip codes. When they first set them up, our Grand Rapids zip codes were a block of zip codes, and then you had your suburbs, and they had their zip codes, which were within, just outside that block. Well, as Grand Rapids, they got more in population, etc. The zip codes go from 49506 to 4954 something or other. Well, to be able to whittle down to the specific zip code specifically for Grand Rapids so that I could determine which one I need to use. And I've got all the zip codes of the world. Well, choose a country, choose a state, choose a city. Okay, here's the zip codes. And I'm only seeing those zip codes, and I could whittle it down to there. So that's the reason why I would use a cascading prompt, to be able to drill down quickly, easily.
Okay, from Shepard, if the report data is too big, can dynamic parameters still be used?
Yeah. Are you talking specifically having to do with the .NET solution about embedding the report in or not? Either way, yeah. If you've got quite a bit of data, a dynamic prompt or a drop-down that's a component that you've built inside of either Flash, Flex, or .NET or Eclipse, it still could be used. It might be a little bit slow in, you click the drop-down for the countries, and because it has to go check for the fact that, the African nations have changed names 6 times this year. I'm joking. It might be just a little bit slow bringing up that particular one, or cities added in, but it's not that bad. The latency is not that bad with the dynamic prompt.
Okay, question from Thomas, actually 2 from Thomas. Can a report with the cascading parameter be exported to someone without a resident copy of Crystal reports?
Depends specifically how you export it out. With the .NET solution, if you go 64-bit, the cascading prompts do not work, but if you go 32-bit in building of your application, they do. If you use the report viewer from Business Objects, the cascading prompts are working. But if you do it as a PDF, PDFs do not allow for the cascading prompts. So it really depends on how you export it out.
And then his other question was, can all records be selected with a dynamic parameter?
Yes, actually now, within Crystal Reports 2011, or actually 2008 and above, you have the option inside of the parameter fields here. Let me just get into, I hit the wrong one. Need to edit this parameter. You now have the ability down inside of here, and it's because I'm using a string, but you can say that you want an empty prompt. So if I were to do a prompt specifically that has a date range, I could say, well, here's the start date, but I'm not giving an end date. Or here is, I want a range between here and here, and I'm only allowing people to see records from the 1980s and above. We could go in and we could limit them, and we could have no end range. Before 2008, that wasn't true. And I could see everything. Have the ability to say, I am not supplying any information here.
Okay. Any other questions for Michael before we end the webinar? Okay. I think that'll do it. Michael, thank you so much for your time. Again, everyone online right now with us, thanks so much for taking some of your time today. And you can look for additional public webinars as part of our Next Level webinar series from New Horizons. Check out our websites for upcoming schedules, and have a great day.